undo both straps, you come to the front first. Okay. We'll look at the front, make sure it's not leaning. The truck's not leaning to one side or the other. Okay. Also going to look underneath. I'm going to check for any kind of leaks underneath. Make sure my headlights are clear, not cracked or damaged. All the other lights on the front are amber color, not cracked or damaged. Then I'm going to open up my hood. I'm going to come around to the passenger side first. Okay. Passenger side, there's 4 things we're going to look at. I prefer to work my way from top and go down. Totally up to you on how you want to do it. So the first thing I'm going to check is my coolant, my antifreeze. Okay, this tank is right there in the center. So I'm going to check that, make sure the level is full. I can see it in the glass on the side. The second item we're going to check any kind of hoses that's here. Radiator hoses, air hoses. Make sure that they're both secure on both sides. Make sure they're not damaged or leaking. Okay, good so far? Third item we're going to check is our alternator. It's right here on this truck. I'm going to tell him 3 things about my alternator. I want to make sure it's properly secured to the engine. I'm going to check the electric connections, make sure they're secured on both sides. Electric cables are not cut or frayed. Then on the front of it, there's a belt. I'm going to check that belt, make sure it's not cracked or damaged. It doesn't play more than 3/4 of an inch. The fourth thing we're going to check on this side is our water pump. On this one, it's right down below. It's that silver and brown box. Okay. So I'm going to check my water pump, make sure it's properly secured to the engine, make sure it's not leaking water, and it uses the same belt as my alternator. So no cracks or damage, doesn't play more than 3/4 of an inch.
Use the same belt as what?
The alternator. Okay, so that green belt that's around the front, it works that water pump too. Alright, so that's this side. Check our coolant, check our hoses, tell them 3 things about my alternator, I'll tell them 3 things about my water pump. Alright, now we'll swing around to the driver's side. Alright, again on this side, I like to work my way from top down. Totally up to you though. So check the radiator hoses on this side. Make sure that they're secured both ends. Make sure they're not leaking. Next thing, I'm going to check my oil. Dipstick's right back there. So you do not have to pull it out. You can just explain it.
This one here, right?
Yes. I would check my dipstick, check the oil level, make sure it's a good level.
Okay.
Third item we're going to check is our air compressor. Okay, that yellow box. I'm going to tell him 3 things about it. My air compressor is properly secured to the engine. I'll make sure that the air compressor is not leaking air. And then we identify this air compressor, it's gear driven. Okay. There's 2 types of air compressors. Some of them have a belt, and some of them have gears inside. Just identify that this one is gear driven. Okay. Then we're going to check all of our steering. I'm going to check my power steering fluid, make sure it's at a full level. Okay. Check my steering column, make sure the column is properly secured on both ends, not bent or damaged, and it doesn't play more than 10 degrees. Next thing is our U-joint right here. Make sure the U-joint is properly secured, no missing pins or bolts, and it's properly greased. The next is our steering pump. My steering pump is properly secured to the truck, no missing bolts, and I'm going to check it for leaks. Okay. 2 more pieces on our steering. My steering arms, make sure that they're not bent, cracked, or damaged. They're properly secured with the nut and the pin. Then I'm going to check my tie rod. Okay. The tie rod is that thick bar on the bottom. Make sure it's connected to both wheels. No missing nuts or bolts. No cracks or damage. And right after that, we hit our axle. Shock, secured top and bottom. Make sure there's no leaks. Springs, secure both sides. None are missing or damaged. The U-bolt is properly secured. No missing nuts, no cracks or damage. Then my bracket, secured to the truck and the springs. No missing bolts, not bent or damaged. Then we'll check our brake system. Brake hoses, properly secured on both ends. I'll make sure they're not damaged or leaking air. And I'll check my brake chamber. Chamber is secure with the clamp around it. I'll make sure it's not cracked or damaged, not leaking air. Third piece, slack adjuster and push rod. Make sure my slack adjuster and push rod are properly secured. There's no missing bolts. Doesn't play more than 1 inch. Last thing on our brakes is our pads. I'm going to make sure my brake pads are thick. Make sure the drums are not cracked or damaged, and there's no fluid on them. Okay. Then we'll check our tires. Tread on the tires has to be more than 4/30 seconds. There's nothing, they're evenly worn on top. Sides, no cuts, damage, or bubbles. The valve, I'll make sure it's not leaking, and I will check the pressure with a gauge. My rim, it's not bent, cracked, or damaged, no welding. Lug nuts, none are missing. Lugs are all secured, and there's no rust between. The hub seal, I'll make sure it's not leaking. Okay.